Hi, and welcome to the second video in this series on how to start and lead a small group. In this video, we're going to be looking at how do you form your group. Again, this if you're watching this video, presumably it's because you're interested in forming or leading a small group. Maybe somebody proposed the idea to you. Maybe you had the idea yourself, and you found one way or another this set of videos. The first video, we looked at the question, why start a small group? Why small groups? In this video, we're going to answer the question, how do you start a small group? Specifically, how do you find people for your small group? And one thing I want to tell you up front now in the next two videos that we're going to be looking at, a recurring theme, you're going to hear me say it more and more, repeat it time and time again, pray. Pray. And in the context of this video, who do I ask to be part of my small group? Great question. And my first strong recommendation is ask the Lord. He knows who's supposed to be in your small group. Ask him. Pray. Ask him about who you are supposed to invite. Trust in him. Rely on him. Again, he knows who's supposed to be in your small group. He knows who he wants you to ask. Trust in that. So as we're going through all these different tips that I'll offer, ideas on where to look, keep in the back of your mind, I should be, as I'm compiling my list, always in prayer. So you're going to start a list of people who you think, just sort of maybe brainstorming, come up with names. Pray about these people. I always ask the Lord, who do you want me to ask to invite to be in my small group? Saturate your entire small group process with prayer and rely on his strength, okay? So pray about who you want. Okay, with that as the background then, and continue as more as the foundation, how do you do that then? Specifically, who do I put on the list? Start with people you know. Like, just, again, you're starting with a list, and maybe you're not going to ask all these people, but start with people who you know, who you think, you don't have to know them necessarily real well, but people you're acquainted with. For me, when I've started small groups before, I've thought about who are the people, literally who I sit around at church. Who are the people who I find myself in conversations with during coffee and donuts after Mass? Who are the people who I interact with on a regular basis in a church setting? By the way, I want to be explicit here. This might include people in your family. This video is for a very broad sense of a small group. Maybe your family is your small group. Maybe it's your spouse or your children. Maybe they're the small group that God is calling you to lead. So make sure and include people who you know that you have relationships with, that you're acquainted with, that they're on this list. Maybe you're part of a Knights of Columbus or Catholic Daughters group in your parish. Think about people, again, in those settings, those circumstances, who you might ask and put them on the list. Remember, you're always going to be praying on this list. You're going to shorten this list down, but those are definitely people who you would want to start with. The other thing, too, I'd say is ask your parish leadership who you should include on your list. Ask your pastor. Ask maybe the DRE. In your parish. Maybe if you're thinking about starting a small group for youth, ask your youth minister. Be thinking about who are the people in the parish who know the people in the parish, and ask them. Maybe members of your parish council. Ask others. I'm thinking about starting a small group. You know me, and maybe tell them, here are some of the people I have in mind. You might know these people. Who else should go on this list? Okay, so be thinking about all those folks. Now, what your ultimate goal is when you're going to be actually making the invitation in terms of group size. There's no magic number. Most people would say 8 to 10, give or take a few. It can be as small as maybe 4 or 5. It's That's getting a little bit small. But 4 or 5 up to 12, maybe 15 tops. That's probably starting to get a little bit larger. But that's the number of your people that you're ultimately going to want to try to end up with, somewhere between 4, 5, and 15. So that's the ultimate goal, but your list could be a lot longer because you probably get some no's. As you're praying, there's probably some people who you're like, maybe I'm not going to ask this person right now. I don't sense that the Lord wants that. Okay. If you're going to be inviting youth, unless it's your family member, so if it's people who aren't part of your family, high schoolers, junior high, kids who aren't part of your family, I'd make it single sex. So if you're a guy, lead a group of boys. If you're a woman, lead a group of girls. I wouldn't do co-ed small groups. Just the nature, again, if as I mentioned in the first video, where you're trying to apply the teachings to life, there's accountability, there's support offered. There's going to be vulnerability. Oftentimes you want people to start sharing from their heart. And with junior high and high schoolers, it's just a lot simpler if you have guys groups, boys groups, and girls groups. Okay. But with adults, co-ed can be fine. Men's groups, women's groups, but mixed sex groups can also work fine. So as you're compiling your list and you're thinking of male, female, age is part of a factor, but then again, ask the Lord what his desire is for you. The final thing I would mention here before we get to concretely making the ask, consider one thing to pray about as well is, should you have a co-leader? Does the Lord want you to invite somebody else to be your wingman? To lead the group with you. That can be a really helpful thing. Maybe you've got to be gone, or there's somebody else who can sort of step in your place if you're gone for a particular session and lead the group. You don't have to have a co-leader, and maybe you won't be able to find a co-leader. Maybe the Lord doesn't want a co-leader for you, but I encourage you to consider that as part of your discernment process for who you are going to be inviting to your small group. Okay, so now just a little bit on actually making the ask. You're going to ask somebody, invite them to be in your small group. Again, pray. So ask the Lord to give you the words, to give you, if you're nervous, maybe the peace. If you're excited, maybe the calm. Whatever it is that you might need, ask the Lord for it. So whether it's a first person-to-person conversation on the phone, introduce yourself to the extent needed. If they don't know who you are, introduce yourself. Tell them that you're going to be leading a small group for a few weeks, and I'd start your initial session with just a few weeks. You're going to be leading a small group for a few weeks, and you wanted to invite them to be a part of it. Tell them, we're planning to meet weekly or every other week, whatever it is, for an hour or hour and a half. Again, whatever it is, to grow in faith. Tell them a little bit about the resource that you'll be using, the resource, the book, the video, or whatever it is. Tell them what it is and a little bit about it. Tell them that you're going to have some prayer and discussion, conversation as part of this group, but it's not a study. I mentioned that in the first video. I'd emphasize, underline that this is not a study. You want to make sure that they understand this is really about growing in understanding and living out our faith. Tell them why you want to do it. I think it's really helpful to tell them why you want to lead the study and why you're inviting them. If you have, particularly if there's a strong reason why you felt that you should ask them, tell them what that is. And then finally, depending on, if they're open to it, just ask them, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Email, phone call, text, whatever it is, ask them for that. So that's kind of how you go through the ask. I would recommend practicing it. If you're nervous about it, practice. Practice with a good friend or a spouse. And then I'd start with the people that you know best, maybe the easiest ones to ask. And you're asking them, and as you're going, some of those things like the logistics, where you're going to meet, how often, to some degree, I'd leave that up to the degree you can, a little bit up to them. So maybe you've got a few options that would work in terms of days of the week and time of day. Leave those options open. As you form your group, they'll narrow down. But that way, you're giving the group some say, and you're not artificially limiting it more than you need to. Okay? There's just a few tips on how you can start a group. Pray throughout, sort of brainstorm a list based on relationships you have. Ask your parish leadership for ideas, and then just go ahead and make the ask. And trust that the Lord knows who you are to ask and will give you the words when you're actually making the ask. Rely on him, trust in his strength, and he will lead you throughout this process. In the next video, we're going to look at how to actually lead a small group session. Stay tuned.